So CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, is underway, and I'm going to do a deconstruction of Donald Trump Jr.'s speech. I'm choosing Jr. because it's extremely likely that he'll be the next Republican nominee in the presidential elections after his father. The Republicans have knowingly moved into fascism. Here's what the CPAC stage looks like. This shape is called an odal rune. It was the badge of the Nazi SS Race and Settlement Main Office, which was responsible for maintaining the racial purity of the Nazi SS. It is not a mistake or an oversight that the most recent iteration of the American conservative movement, MAGA, has chosen a symbol of racial purity to be their literal platform. It's from this basis that Jr. addresses the audience. As I go through this, I'll be talking about the Republicans' move into fascism, but also why the Democrats are also responsible for this move as well.
Wow! How's it going, CPAC? Or I heard someone earlier phrase it a little bit better. TPAC. That's what it feels like, guys.
Classic open up with a joke speechwriting tactic, and we can see that Jr. is not his father, as it falls flat. Still, though, the statement is correct. Trump is still very much in control of the Republican Party. This is evidenced by the fact that several key Republicans like Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney, who have earned Trump's ire, are not present at this event.
Well, first and foremost, it's awesome to be here. It's great to see this kind of enthusiasm, and it's great to actually be in a full room.
This seemingly small statement actually reveals quite a lot. Trump ascended to the presidency with statements of solidarity which addresses the grievances of the populace. Jr. is following that tactic here. It's nice to be in a full room addresses the common grievance of the people while standing in solidarity with them.
You know, honestly, guys, what I see in Florida right now is exemplary of the Republican Party. Right? This is a state, like the party is, that has open schools, open businesses, and open churches.
The Republican position on COVID has become the strong will survive. Simply allow the virus to kill who it's going to kill, take no precautions. God will sort it out. This turns very dangerous as people begin to cling to ancient beliefs, like the people who died were judged by God, and the survivors are God's chosen. These sorts of statements are held as deep truths within evangelical circles, and will be used by racial purists as they point out that COVID kills more minorities than whites, not because they're poor and vulnerable due to centuries of white supremacist policies, but because they are naturally inferior and judged by God.
What we've seen in some of the more left-leaning states is exactly the opposite. The only thing that they have open is open borders.
Jr.'s pivot into open borders here continues the narrative of racial purity. People coming over the border are dirty immigrants, drug dealers, rapists, and thugs. We should be suspicious of them coming to steal our jobs. Ignore the fact that these people are fleeing American wars. Ignore the fact that it's massive corporate interests with government subsidies laying off their workforces to hire immigrant slave laborers. The problem is that minorities are naturally scheming and evil.
And it doesn't work, guys. In the first 30 days of Joe Biden's presidency, all of the things that I said would come true in the book Liberal Privilege that I wrote last summer.
Gotta plug the book to the base. That's just good business. Liberal privilege is an ironic title, given that no one on earth is more privileged than Jr. He was raised in a skyscraper by a family which built skyscrapers. He's never worked a day in his life and is on a path to being the leader of the largest military on earth because of a trail blazed by his father. Like all good grifters, Jr. takes his own faults and deflects them onto others.
Are happening. We listened to months of media telling us that Joe Biden, he's a moderate, don't worry. He's not going to end energy. He's not going to end pipelines, which is partially correct. He's not going to end Russian pipelines. He's only going to end American pipelines. The Russian ones are just fine.
This is in reference to killing the Keystone Pipeline. Junior maintains the position of racial purity here by immediately saying the largest problem with this is the Russians. He's not talking about this issue economically. He's not talking about this issue based on the merits of the project, or even the more traditional positions, job creation and lower taxes. He's outright saying killing one pipeline project is bad because we have other pipelines to foreign nations. The implication is that this is bad because other nations are naturally inferior than Americans.
They're going to cave to China. No, that was never going to happen. Of course it happened. You think that billion-dollar investment in Hunter came for free? No, the Chinese have a great return on investment.
Gotta get China involved as well. He doesn't really even make a point here, but it's worth noting that the base clearly thinks that China is simply bad because it's China. Couple that with their fear of Russia, and you're getting a pretty clear picture of a group of xenophobic racists, which makes sense as Junior talks to them while standing on a Nazi symbol for racial purity.
But guys, more importantly, who would have thought that within 33 days we'd be bombing the Middle East again? I would have. Oh no, guys, come on, the military-industrial complex, I'm surprised it took them 33 days. I guess they waited till the first month, so they couldn't say that was part of the first 30, but it was only shortly thereafter where we started bombing the Middle East.
While it might be tempting to believe that this is being said out of a moral objection to bombing Middle Eastern countries, the Republican argument is less complex. It is simply a waste of resources to bomb inferior races. Trump preferred to use assassination as his military tool, which is seen as a more effective way to suppress the barbarian hordes. The objection is not moral, but tactical.
Speaking of bombing the Middle East, have you seen Liz Cheney's poll numbers? No, listen, the one thing I'll say for Liz Cheney is I'm sure she has a lot of bipartisan support, because if there's one thing that she and Joe Biden definitely want to do, it's bomb the Middle East. Everything else is a disaster. Everything else is just rhino policies, the kinds of policies that put the Republican Party in a position where they needed a Donald Trump.
This pivot shows a complete awareness by the Trumps. Junior stabs Liz Cheney, a possible competitor, and brings the audience back to its core grievance against the Republican Party, wasting resources on wars instead of helping citizens. In very short order, Junior tells the story of his father's ascension to the presidency. They're aware of what is happening, and they are manipulating it to maintain their position of power.
No, seriously. Liz Cheney and her politics are only slightly less popular than her father is at a quail hunt. What?
The Trumps use humor very effectively. Junior is aware that what he is saying here is inappropriate, but that's why people like it. The left's mania for censorship and politically correct language fails pretty clearly because the Trumps gain sympathy by flouting those ideals. People respect them for sticking their thumb in the eye of political correct culture, which doesn't allow them to be openly racist, which is something they would like to be. A joke like this again addresses the grievances of the base with statements of solidarity.
Fact checkers, please have at it.
The crowd goes wild at this statement because they no longer believe in the veracity of the fact checkers, and are happy to see Junior challenge them directly. This is why it's dangerous to lie people into wars, because it means grifters like the Trumps can claim that everything they say is a lie. Who are you going to believe? The people who lied you into an endless war in Iraq, or the people who stand in solidarity with your desire to be the superior race?
Fact check, true. Right? Listen, like I said, Liz Cheney, she hates Donald Trump and his policies because her family has a long history of friendly fire. But she also hates them because she's tied to an establishment that has done nothing but fail us time and time again. You've heard the rhetoric from some of them over the last couple weeks, and now you've seen that change very quickly. Because if there's one thing the Republican Party has been really good at over the last few decades, it's snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They've caved to every special interest. They've caved to corporate America. They've caved and bowed to the radical left that hates their guts, hates their values, and hates their freedoms. Lincoln Project Liz, as I'd like to call her, is the leader of that failed movement. And if we want to go back to losing, if we want to go back to an America Last policy, we should be following that. But I don't, and I don't think anyone in this room does either.
This section reveals the ongoing internal power struggle between the Trumps and the old guard Republicans. For the Trumps, this is what this speech is for, to consolidate power within the party after a loss, so that the base doesn't revert to traditional leadership. Keep them focused on the Trumps.
So, you know what, guys? The first 30 days has been a disaster. The lies the media told you wouldn't happen are all happening. But hey, at least they have a diverse cabinet. Right? No, yeah, it's very diverse. That's what we saw, right? What is the policy of the SBA? Well, first and foremost, we appointed a woman. Well, that's wonderful. Is she competent? Because there's competent women and there's incompetent women, just like there's competent men and incompetent men. We've seen that. We know that to be a fact. But when you don't have policy to address the incompetence and think you can get away with it by just talking about diversity blindly, it's sort of a problem, isn't it?
The left's failure to address the material conditions of his citizens while simultaneously focusing on diversity issues allows Junior to use it as ammunition. This is an effective and persuasive tactic because it reveals the hypocrisy of playing to people's desire for freedom for their identity while abandoning them materially. Junior is stating it flatly, and it is a major grievance of his base. If the Democrats wanted to destroy the Trumps, they would help the populace. If they don't, Junior here, or his dad, will be the next president.
This month alone, they've banned the Muppets. Right? I mean, if there's things that you thought were sort of above cancellation, you would be wrong. There is nothing the radical left won't cancel. Hasbro now wants a gender-neutral Mr. Potato Head. These are the issues of our times, folks. I mean, if Hasbro really wanted a gender-neutral Mr. Potato Head so badly, they should just slap a picture of CNN's Brian Sletler on the cover of their next potato. What? They don't call him Mr. Potato Head for nothing. I mean, you know, we might as well get something out of the branding.
Do you see how much traction this is getting? Do you see how much support and sympathy Junior is generating here by pointing out what has been obvious for decades? Statements like, "These are the issues of the day," highlight that the opposition is not taking his base's grievances seriously, instead choosing to chastise them for their desires for racial purity. I have to state it directly. Racists should still have food and shelter. And if you don't give racists food and shelter while chastising them, then they'll group under figures like Junior who'll acknowledge their grievances and go along with their racism. If the Democrats wanted to break this cycle, they would provide the base necessities for the populace. But they don't, and so here stands Donald Trump Jr.
But guys, we can talk about all of these things. We can talk about the liberal hypocrisy, liberal privilege. Just look at how magically, in 33 days, children in cages turned into migrant shelters for children. Now, mind you, nothing actually changed. If you look at the pictures, there's nice bars on the walls. Nothing changed other than the media's outlook. Where is the outrage about this? Where is the outrage about an asinine immigration policy that is encouraging people to bring children, unaccompanied and otherwise, into a country? Guess who gets hurt? Our low-wage earners, who for the first time in modern history under Donald Trump started seeing real wage growth.
Notice that there's not an acknowledgement here that kids in cages is evil or abhorrent. The grievance is against the media because they condemned the Trumps for it, but are now working with the Bidens to make it okay. This moves into the classic immigrant scapegoating, which is indicative of all fascist movements, and ends with the granddaddy lie. Real wages are going up. All you have to do is ignore inflation, and this is true. The number you are getting is higher. The value of that number has decreased. But if you say a lie often enough and loud enough, it becomes the truth.
See it time and time again. There's a double standard by which we live, but when you look at what's going on, if people were informed of the actual facts, rather than spoon-fed a narrative by big tech and the mainstream media, we wouldn't be in these things. There was a poll that came out just this week that said 1 in 6 people would not have voted for Biden had they known about the Hunter Biden scandal. Yeah, where is Hunter? Guys, I'm sure he's making billions in China right now. Don't worry. Don't worry. One in 6, guys, 17% of the 80 million that voted for Joe Biden wouldn't, had they even heard of the basics of his corruption. We were all talking about it, guys. It wasn't anything new, but that also shouldn't surprise us. We've been talking about Andrew Cuomo sentencing Nana to death for 10 months. But no one was going to talk about it until they got their wishes. No one was going to address Democrat incompetence. We believe all women until they accuse a Democrat. Then, not so much.
Another illustration of why policies of disinformation being perpetrated against the populace by organizations like the FBI, the CIA, and the State Department are extremely dangerous. In a vacuum of truth, grifters and con men can come in and present themselves as the holders of truth. The Trumps have excelled at gaining the sympathy of the public, and they've done it by acknowledging the real grievances of the public while pointing out that their competitors are ignoring them.
But guys, that's why we have to stay engaged. That's why we have to stay in the fight. That's why we can't allow them to steamroll us like they have done for decades. When you look at what's going on just this week in Congress, you have Democrats petitioning major corporations, Comcast, Amazon, to ban conservative news outlets. Not radical parties. Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, just ban them. You don't see Republicans saying, let's talk about CNN as a place of disinformation. I mean, as a recipient of their ire for a couple of years, I can assure you that they were lying about Russia collusion. We all know that now, but no one actually brings it up because they can get away with it. They are able to do that. Big tech will silence you if you come out against it. They will crush you. They will call you racist and everything else. Just like, imagine, we'll bring back Cuomo, right? Imagine Ron DeSantis did what Cuomo has done over the last couple of years. He wouldn't be getting an Emmy. He'd be in jail. Right? Credible accusations of harassment swept under the rug. Verbal harassment swept under the rug. Hiding evidence from the DOJ swept under the rug. No problem. Give him an Emmy. Remember Fredo when he was talking about it? Oh, for months? Oh, where's Fredo? He's so quiet these days. Why isn't Fredo talking about these things right now? Again, liberal privilege. No, we can't address that. Really? You can't address that, but you had no problem joking around with massive Q-tips, making clowns of yourselves for months prior. That's what we're up against, folks.
Cancel culture fails. All it does is empower people like the Trumps to organize against it on the grounds that free speech trumps all other issues. We can have the larger conversation about how inciting violence is not free speech, but people are far more concerned about political actors using their authority to silence dissenting voices, which is how the MAGA people view themselves. They view themselves as dissenting from the status quo. When you deplatform them, it only alienates people and increases the zeal of their convictions. You must be scared of the truth of their statements because you're not willing to address them.
But together, we can win these fights. We have to be vocal. We can't be put in the corner. We must be out and engaged. And that's where you guys come in. So, I'm looking forward to Sunday. I imagine it will not be what we call a low-energy speech. And I assure you that it will solidify Donald Trump and all of your feelings about the MAGA movement as the future of the Republican Party. So thank you, CPAC. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the love. You guys are the best.
The MAGA movement is a fascist evangelical Christian movement that has chosen to follow the only politician who is even acknowledging their legitimate grievances. They are exhausted by the perpetual finger-waving and cancel culture of a group which ignores their material and economic grievances. If the Democrats want to stop the MAGA movement, they need to address these grievances directly. A minimum wage increase, a basic income, universal health care, any issue which can create that unity the Democrats pretend to care about. Far more likely, the Democrats will continue to ignore the Trumps and MAGA and continue to play petty identity politics. This will only leave the door open for people who are standing on a Nazi symbol for racial purity to take over the levers of power. If you've made it here, you'd best subscribe. I post daily content analyzing the collapse of capitalism from the communist perspective. Please be sure to like and share this video. If you'd like to support me, my Patreon is in the description below. Thank you for listening. Good luck. We're gonna need it.